How's it going? This is Corporate Mower Repair. I've got a Stihl ms170 in for repair today. These are really good homeowner saws, but there's one big flaw with these carburetors, and that is the non-adjustable or not fully adjustable carburetor that comes on these. If you'll notice, there's no access points to adjust the carb. And what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to show you how to convert this carburetor setup convert it to a carburetor where you have full range of adjustment. And the reason why this is so important is every saw, whether it's a Stihl, Husqvarna, Echo, it doesn't matter what brand the saw is, every chainsaw, weed eater, you name it, is going to begin to leak air through the crank seals, through the intake. Somewhere it's going to begin sucking air in. And you need to be able to overcome that by richening the mixture by turning the low side adjustment out. You turn that low side out, it's going to let more fuel in, and that's going to counteract the extra air that's being allowed into the saw through the crank seals or whatever. And when you don't richen it, that's how you burn a saw up. One runs too lean. So I'm going to show you the carburetor that you need to order, and then the modification that you need to make to the saw so that you can run a fully adjustable carburetor on this saw, and it makes it run so much better. All right, so if you order a carburetor for a Stihl 170, whether Amazon, eBay, whatever, most likely it's going to pull up a carburetor like this, okay? Now, notice where the high and the low ports are, they're blocked off. They don't want you messing with it. The only thing you have is this here, and that is all but useless. Do not order this carburetor. Don't do it. If you've got a 170 chainsaw, order a carburetor for a 180, 180C, whatever. When you search a carburetor for the 180, it's going to bring up this carburetor. Now notice, on this, you've got a high and a low adjustment. Now the only differences in these carburetors are the fuel inlet's just a little different. The one on the 180 is going to be plastic. This one's metal, doesn't make any difference. And then the top end here is a little different. On the 170, you've got this plate that's used in the air cleaner housing, where this one's just flat. All you got to do is when you take your old carburetor off your 170, just swap that plate over. All right, your diaphragm, your gaskets, all that will stay in place. Just swap that plate over and you'll be good to go. And then the other difference is where your throttle mounts. Notice that's a hole there, whereas this is a slot. All right. So, and I have seen them where the throttle linkage will bounce out of that slot, because it's open, you see. Whereas on this, that throttle cable bar is not going to jump out of that. So I'm going to show you how to take the old one off, put the new one on, and then the modifications you need to make, because you need to make it where you can access these adjustments while it's on the saw. So I'll show you all that in just a minute. All right, you're going to begin by taking these two 8mm nuts off. All right, after you've zipped those off, don't lose them. Put them in a safe place. I like to use this little metal magnetic tray. If you don't have a tray or a box to put them in, just hold them in your mouth. It won't hurt anything. All right, and then you're going to pull that off. All right, now what we want to do to get our throttle bar off, you've got 1, 2 screws here to T15. All right, you'll zip those out, and then this little cover will come off, and it'll make it where you can remove your throttle bar. All right, once you've zipped those out, this little cover will come off. And then you got a little spring here. This is for your little safety lock deal. Just push that down and over to the side. It'll fold up. All right. And then your this little bar will come off, your trigger. Slide that off, set that off to the side. And we'll deal with that in a minute. The next thing we want to do is get your choke assembly out of there. Take you a flathead and pop that up right there. So just stick you a flathead right there and pop it up just like that. And slide that out of the way. And then your little choke bar will fall right out of that. If you notice this little bar right here, that bar right there, all it does is goes into that hole. So once you pop that up, you'll pull it out of this end and then just move it out of here. Don't worry about taking that wire off. You can if you want to, if it's in your way, if it's bugging you, that's fine, but it's not necessary. Just sort of move it out of the way. And then now you're ready to slide your carburetor off after you get you some needle nose pliers or flathead, whatever, and just that fuel line right there, you're going to slide it this way. All right, so after you slide that fuel line off, then your whole carburetor is ready to just pull right off, set it to the side. Okay, a lot of times it depends on how much age is on yours. Stihl uses really, really good fuel line. You see how thick it is? A lot of times you don't have to replace this line, but this one is really stiff, and I'm not going to let it go back with the old fuel line. So I'm going to show you how to replace this fuel line real quick. Okay, hopefully, if you mount yours in the vise, hopefully you emptied your fuel out first. I didn't. But empty your fuel out, and then your fuel cap here, hold it by the string because you don't want to rip it out of the cap. Just hold it by the string and give it a little jerk. This flexes, you're not going to break it. And then down in there, you're going to see your fuel filter. I don't know where my light is. You'll see your fuel filter down in there. Just reach in there, grab it, pull it out. If your hands are too big to fit in there, call your wife. If your wife don't want to help, then just use some needle nose pliers, whichever's more convenient. Pull your fuel filter off, and then you'll just grab it from up here. Get you some pliers or flathead screwdriver, and then the whole thing will just pull out. All right, once you've got it out, you want to make sure that when you set it back in there, this little arrow, you want it pointed towards you, which, I mean, you can tell they've got an opening there for where that arrow needs to sit. But I don't know why they do them like this, but in all these fuel lines that they send you, this piece here, it ain't gonna fit in that hole. What I do is I cut this fat part off, and it serves two purposes. That is so big that it does not fit tight on the fuel filter. So, and I don't know if you can tell through here, but it's a smaller diameter here, and it's just better because it's going to fit your fuel filter more tightly. And if you're worried that it's not going to sit far enough down in the tank, it does. It works just fine. So cut that off, and then you're going to drop that down through your hole, and then reach inside with some pliers and grab it, and then you just want to pull down until this lower part goes down into the hole, and do make sure that it goes in there all the way around, because if not, when you turn the saw on its side, it's going to leak. But all you want to do is look inside the tank and make sure that it is seated all the way down. All right, and then once you've got it seated down in the groove, reach in there with some pliers, pull it out some, and then stick your fuel filter in there and let it fall back in, and then we're ready to move on. All right, now you can see it down there in the bottom of the tank. It's going in there far enough. So now let's start working on installing our new carburetor. All right, now we want to swap these plates over. I've already took the screws out of these, but all you want to do is swap this plate off of your OEM Stihl carburetor on to this 180 carburetor that you're replacing it with. Now, make sure that when you go to do this, all right, the heads on the OEM carburetor are just a little bigger. So use the screws out of the OEM carburetor, out of the 170 carburetor, and put that onto your new one. Don't use those little ones, use those. All right, I've got it swapped over. It should be oriented like that. Don't strip them, just snug them up. Don't take a lot. Now let's go put it on the saw. All right, we're ready to slide it into place. All right, now, you see the dilemma. We're going to need to make adjustments on these, but you don't got any access point. That hole there was for that useless jet on the OEM carb. All we want to do is, I've got a Dremel. Look, if you've got some diagonal cutters, if you've got 10 snips, whatever, all you want to do is just cut a section of this out, and then you'll be able to access. Somebody might say, oh, well, it's not going to look good. Okay, well, I'm sorry, it's not going to look good, but you'll have a fully adjustable carburetor that you can run on this chainsaw. And even when, unlike the OEM carburetor, when it goes to running lean because it's got a leaky seal, you'll be able to counteract that with this carburetor. So I'm going to cut a piece of this out so that once I've got it mounted, I'll be able to access it and adjust it. All right, there it is. Now I have full access to it, and all I used was them right there. I've got a Dremel, but just to show you, you don't got to have fancy tools to do this kind of stuff. I use those cutters, and you know, if you don't look at it, it looks completely factory. So, all right, I'm gonna start hooking up the linkage and the throttle choke assembly and all that, and we'll get rolling on it. All right, it started raining here, so I don't know how well you can hear me. I'm gonna talk louder, hopefully it's not too obnoxious. First, we want to put our fuel line on. So just stick that on, and then you want to put your throttle bar on. Now, it's got to be oriented like this, okay? Make sure it's in this direction. And all you want to do is just slip in there, and you'll just weave it in, and it'll come down and be sitting right there. So I'm going to do the fuel line and the throttle bar, and I'll come back to you. All right, I lied to you. It's got to be oriented like this. I had you doing it basically upside down or backwards. Let it be oriented like this. All right, and now we're gonna do put our trigger back together. All right, kind of hard for me to do one-handed, but let's fall in there like that. And then, well, put it on there, and then slide it onto your hole, and then that spring will fold over. I'll show you. All right, it's going to sit in there just like that. And your little spring here, notice there's a little notch on this safety paddle, and it's going to go in that groove right there. All right, I'm going to throw my cover back on, and then we'll hook up the choke bar. All right, I messed up. I forgot something. You've got to do your choke lever, your choke bar, before you hook this up. All right. Put your throttle, your choke piece in that groove. All right, and then go ahead and stick it in the hole for it here. And then once you do, you'll put it into that hole there, and then it'll click into that groove there. So let me do that real quick. I want to show you where a lot of people mess up. A lot of people, so you start it here and then put it in there, and then now, and make sure this bar is over the top of that. All right, now where a lot of people mess up, this tab is your kill tab. When you turn it off, that tab hits on that wire that goes to your coil. What a lot of people do is they push it in with this stuck down, and they bend it. So before you go to snap this back into place, sort of hold up on that and make sure that it doesn't get in the way. So hold that up, click it into place, and then we can hook your throttle up. All right, so you've got your throttle hooked back up. Make sure everything is functioning properly. Make sure your throttle's good. Make sure your choke's working good. All right. Everything's like it's supposed to be. So now we're going to put our intake on, and then we'll put fuel in it, and then see what it'll do and see what adjustments it needs. Now do notice that on your intake that you put on, they've got these holes there. The two is your low and your high, and then the one on the bottom for your throttle screw. They've got those holes there so that I don't know, maybe they got in an argument and they, somebody lost the debate on which carburetor they was putting on. But anyways, this intake is there so that with that carburetor on, you can adjust it. So I'm going to put that on, and then we'll go to the next step. All right, one thing I forgot to mention, this piece needs to be trimmed off so that it can seat all the way back, because that throttle screw that's in there now is going to be in the way, so you just want to cut that off right there. Then your intake will go all the way back. All right, and it should look something like that. Now your intake will be able to slide all the way back. All right, and then the final modification you need to make for this fully adjustable carburetor to work is, you know, on the old one you didn't have a throttle set screw. On this carburetor you do, so you've got to make a entrance point for that. And all I do is I just take me a drill bit and I just make me a hole right through there. Of course, you can make it a little prettier than that, clean it up if you want to. But now you've got access to your low and your high, and you've got access to your throttle screw. So I'm going to put fuel in it, air filter on it, and then crank it up and see what adjustments I need to make. All right, let's see what it'll do. All right, on this one, probably all I need to do is idle it up, and it's probably going to be okay. I'm gonna idle my throttle screw up and see if that will pick it up some. All right, I've idled it up, but it is running lean, so I'm going to adjust my low side. Always remember, the screw, the jet closest to the engine is your low, the one furthest away is the high. So on this one, I've idled it up, and it'll sit there and idle, but it's I can tell it's running lean. So I'm going to turn this out about a half a turn and see what it does. All right, I got it adjusted, and maybe this will help. All right, as far as the adjustment goes on your low and your high and your throttle adjustment, go ahead and tighten them all the way in, and I'll tell you the revolutions on mine. All right, on your low, after you tighten it all the way in, do one adjustment all the way out. Do one full revolution of the screw. So in other words, all right, and I just take me a little flathead and put a mark on it so I know. Okay, so that would be a half a turn, and that would be a full turn, okay? On your low, do one full revolution. After you tighten it all the way in, do one full revolution all the way out. All right, so your low is going to be one revolution all the way out. Your high, you want to do 2 1/4. And then on your throttle, do 2 revolutions out. So do 1 revolution out, 2 1/4 all the way out, and then on your throttle, do 2 out. And then you can just kind of fine tune it from there. So I hope that helped. But this carburetor conversion on this, it makes it such a lot better saw. And that's the way they're supposed to run. But those other carburetors that they have on there, they just don't hardly cut it. So hope that helped. Hope you have a blessed one.